We're joined now by Samrat Sengupta, Program Director, Climate Change and Renewable Energy, Center for Science and Environment, Vimlendhu Jha, founder of Swechha India and environmentalist, Bharti Chaturvedi, founder and director, Chintan Environmental Research and Action Group, and Aniket Gupta, student and environmental activist, Diana Award recipient for 2020. Thank you so much all for joining me on the program. And Samrat Sengupta, first to you, your views on India's commitment for capping our emissions by 2070, something that's been appreciated by many. Others have said it's a bit too late, it's too many years ahead, while the officials have said it's the most realistic pledge that we could make.
Yes, the commitment came last night during our Prime Minister's speech at the UN. It seems to be progressive. What they have talked about, their first commitment that non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt, earlier target was 450, so a progressive of 500 gigawatt. But India will meet 50% of its energy requirement. There is a big thing. Energy, if really it means it's not just a communication gap, it's energy requirement, not power requirement, that's huge. 50% from renewable, I think it's a huge thing, and we need to see the details of the plan, how India will achieve to it. Because when we talk about energy, it is not simply power, it is the transport sector, it is the industry, where direct use of fossil fuel in terms of petroleum is getting included, technically.
All right, Bharti Chaturvedi, your views on this, a big commitment towards renewable energies, but really we have to see whether we walk the talk, and as we mentioned just now, that we have to see what the plan really is for the road ahead.
Yes, and I think it's really important also that in his Panch Tattva, the Prime Minister also talked about asking for finance for the poor and ask the rich countries for finance. I think that's extremely important, because it's not really carbon finance, it's really payback time, because many of the countries, and particularly India, we come from a history of a huge, drain of wealth from India, and now we have actually built ourselves up, and that has put some carbon. Of course, India puts out very little compared to the rest of the world, but about 7%. So we do that. And so I think at some level, I also look at it as, payback time. On the other hand, I think what I expect, apart from money from the developed world, is really rejigging the economic framework in which they work. Because this kind of economic culture where you worship people for making trillions and millions of dollars, and going into space and those kinds of things are not going to take us ahead, and there's no way to green them, and that's all not possible. So not only should they be giving out money, because that is if you don't do these two things both, then we can't get justice. And I think that was something quite important that the Prime Minister also gestured to, the idea of justice. And you cannot get justice in the current economic paradigm of the rich countries, because the poor will continue to have much less access to resources, be hit by whether they're typhoons or forest fires or what you may have, and you will continue to see a bigger and bigger gap, not only between countries, but even within countries, like you'll see a gap between the rich and the poor. So I think it's a very, very, very ambitious and important statement by the Prime Minister. But I think what the wealthy countries do, not only in terms of carbon finance, but completely drastically overturning their economic models by 2030, is really the way ahead, instead of this
really have to watch out for. All right, and those commitments, Vimlendhu Jha, in fact, on that, the Prime Minister also talked about, this mantra of life, and he called it lifestyle for environment, which I thought was very interesting and something that, as Bharti is saying, you need to think more about.
It was right kind of noises that were actually made at this World Forum, not just by the Prime Minister, but by the other world leaders. But it's very, very important for all of us to understand that these noises, or these pledges, so to say, have been made historically for last several years. As in the commitments that were made in Paris in 2015, many of them have not been even met. So, as much as I would like to congratulate the Prime Minister to really make those 5 commitments, to really talk about 2070 net zero. However, no one even knows what net zero means in its best way. The fact that India is going to double its coal production, the fact that coal India, which is the biggest miner, is going to mine 1 billion tons by 2024. There's a lot of irony and paradox in this entire climate conversation that we're having globally as well as locally. So these mantras sound great. These mantras read great. But at the end of the day, what happens on the ground, and that is where the real, maza of climate change negotiation or climate change action will be. At the end of the day, the way we treat our forests, the way we look at our environment impact assessment, the way we actually look at construction in ecologically sensitive zones, the way we dilute or not dilute our environmental norms, that is where the real impact is. So climate change can create a cloudburst in Uttarakhand. But how?
All right, I understand what you're saying, making commitments there and what's happening on the ground. You just recently had Minister Nitin Gadkari talking about how, environmental laws are coming in the way of development and stalling in development. He was speaking in Goa. But Aniket Gupta, your view as one of the youngest here on the panel, and as Vimlendu said, yes, a lot of talk has happened in the past as well. A lot of commitments have been made. None of them have been, essentially binding. And that is something that, a lot of people are losing hope from these big forums, and whether the countries will genuinely walk the talk. What is your view?
So I think West really needs to pay up. Just as the Environment Minister yesterday said that the developed nations have failed to meet the annual climate finance of $100 billion support to the developing nation. And also it's important to note that our Prime Minister just yesterday said that from the 17% of world population in India, we are responsible for only 5% of the emissions. And also as India steps forward with new climate goals, especially talking about India, as our Prime Minister announced the 5 points agenda towards tackling the climate change, it has definitely thrown its ball in the court of developed nations. And actually real climate action includes the climate finance as well, just as Bharti said. And it's great to know that he has included how it's gonna be financed and demanded the urgent $1 trillion as soon as possible. And listening to yesterday's headlines, so many news platforms called out India that it is taking 20 years more than what India promised in the Paris Climate Agreement. But I would just say that it's much more ambitious than the countries like China or European Union who have promised to achieve the net zero by 2060.
So right. And officials say it's the most realistic target for us. Samrat Sen Gupta, now if we take a look at the COP26, what is your view on what's happening so far, the commitments? 100 world leaders have also committed to reversing or, ending deforestation by 2030. So another, this is one of the first pledges that has been made at COP26.
COP26 happening on the backdrop of post-COVID. The COVID scenario has changed the world views towards nature. And it is somehow getting reflected about at least about the talk at this moment. Climate justice is getting back to its mainstream. Common but differentiated responsibility, which was sidelined during Paris discussion, should get mainstream now, and India and other developing countries should push for it. That has well been observed in various speeches. And we have to now see how the developed world is going to meet the requirement of 1.5 degrees centigrade, there is a huge gap between the various NDCs and the revised NDCs been committed, which accounts for approximately of 38 gigaton per year from now to a 37 gigaton only reduction in 2030, where it requires to be at the 18 gigaton per year emission by 2030 to meet that 1.5 degrees centigrade. I am not too much in support of the net zero kind of commitment. It is actually a ploy to defer the action down the stream in second or third decade, but we will be losing the time. If we cannot act in this decade, we are losing on climate change. There are several countries, the small and developing countries, the highly vulnerable LDCs. For them, it is just a survival or disease kind of thing. So
right.
That is getting back into the discourse, and possibly the developed countries have understood they are also going to be affected by the climate change. It has seen by last half decade that their backyard is also getting affected. In North America, the heat wave, there's a huge flood in Europe. Everywhere.
All these extreme weather events, I think, have really brought the reality of what we're doing to the climate, right in everybody's face. But thank you so much. That's all the time we have, and clearly commitments being made, but it's for us, the media, activists like you, experts, to keep up the pressure, keep up the vigil, and try to hold authorities to account. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.